I can't say I'm really surprised to sit here and tell you guys that the Yankees and the Dodgers will be playing in the World Series this year, but that's just what's happening now. The Yankees and the Dodgers to meet for the first time since 1981, the 12th time all time between the two franchises. And we're going to talk about that today here on Back to the Dugout. So, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Back to the Dugout here on this Monday afternoon on the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network. I'm Toby Shulman, your host, as always. And today we're going to recap the last bits of the ALCS and the NLCS, those two World Series clinching games for the Dodgers and the Yankees. And then we're going to get into previewing World Series matchup a little bit more, talking about some of the narratives within that series, as well as just kind of previewing each lineup, comparing the two, because both of these powerhouses are pretty evenly matched right now. So it's definitely going to be a fun one, and it's going to be an all-time classic series. So if you're into good baseball, this is all you're going to get with this series. And if you know you're turned off by this series at all, I mean, you really just aren't a real baseball fan then. I mean, these are the two best teams going at it. I believe it was two of the highest three payrolls in the entire league going at it. And some of just the best star power that we have to offer the entire world of baseball. We've got the two best players of all time, arguably, going up against each other in their first ever World Series. So it's going to be a good one. Hopefully it goes to 7 games and it's an all-time classic series. But we're going to recap a little bit of the NLCS and the ALCS before we get into all the World Series stuff. So starting with the ALCS, which ended in a extra innings thriller in Game 5 of that ALCS in Cleveland. The Yankees did not let this series get back to New York. They ended up winning this Game 5, 5-2 off of Juan Soto's electric 3-run homer there in extra innings. But let's talk about the just play-by-play a little bit. We're going to do that for both these games like we usually do with all these postseason games. I feel like that's been a pretty common trend here on the show. But to get it started in the top of the first, Tanner Bibee got the start for the Guardians and looked to do a lot better than he did last time. And it wouldn't have been a very high bar to follow, but the Yankees still ended up coming away with the win. And he arguably did a lot better in this start, but obviously the bullpen didn't really help him out as much too late into the game. So to start this one off, Gleyber Torres again. I mean, I think I said it last show, but it seems like it's like a single, a double, or a walk that he's getting every single game to lead it off. And that's exactly what he's doing. And starting off this World Series in Los Angeles is going to be huge for Torres to see if he can stay hot in the leadoff spot on the road here like he did in Cleveland. So Torres singled up the middle after working up a little bit of a count and battled 2 strikes off of 2 early cutters and was able to single. Soto would double to right, and Torres would get thrown out at home. Judge would then be hit by a pitch. Stanton would strike out swinging. Chisholm would get hit by a pitch, and Rizzo would line out to left. So a pretty eventful inning. No runs to come out of that. Bibee giving up 2 hits, 2 hit by pitches, not a very solid start, and yet he still didn't give up any runs. So if you're Tanner Bibee in Cleveland at that point, you're feeling a little bit uneasy about yourselves, I'm sure, but not just shot entirely. Bottom of the first, Carlos Rodon gets the start for the New York Yankees to look to do what he did last time in this series. Rodon got Kwan to strike out looking, got Fry to strike out looking or strike out swinging, and then Ramirez to ground out to third. So a really quick inning for 3 really solid hitters. Set the tone really nicely for Carlos Rodon in this start. Unfortunately, the Guardians would get out to that early lead first, and Rodon would end up giving up the first runs in this game, but it would not eventually be the dagger to the Yankees. In the top of the second, Volpe struck out swinging, Wells struck out looking as well, and then Alex Verdugo flied out to left. So honestly, a pretty similar inning to what the Guardians had in the bottom of the first. Moving to the bottom of the second is when the Guardians got on the board here with a 1-0 bottom of the second. Lane Thomas, he'd strike out swinging. Josh Naylor would reach on an infield single to third. Jhonkensy Noel would then strike out swinging, and Bo Naylor doubled to right to score Josh Naylor. So Andres Gimenez would line out to end that top half or the bottom half of that inning. But they would go with Bo Naylor there for a 1-0 lead early on. Rodon was working the strikeouts there early. It's really another kind of Garrett Cole thing where if he's missing, he's just going to miss over the plate, and it's going to result in some runs. But when Rodon is on, he's one of the better pitchers in this Yankee rotation. That's definitely not up for debate at all. He just needs the run support, and eventually they would get that. But The Guardians would ultimately strike first in this one. In the top of the third, Tanner Bibee still in for Cleveland. As Torres would pop out to second, Soto would ground out to first, and then Judge would strike out. So an easy 1-2-3 inning for Tanner Bibee there. In the bottom of the third, Carlos Rodon would stay in the game. Brian Rocchio would walk. Stephen Kwan would then fly out to center. David Fry would strike out his second time, swinging against Carlos Rodon, and then Jose Ramirez grounded out to second base. So the score stayed 1-0 there. Rodon clearly had David Fry's number in this game, at least for those first couple of at-bats. In the top of the fourth for the Yankees, Tanner Bibee would still be in the game to this point, and he would work another 1-2-3 inning, which now at this point kind of started to worry Yankee fans a little bit. You worried whether or not Bibee was really settled in at this point, and whether or not this was going to be one of those games where 1 or 2 runs was enough to win it for the opposing team, like we kind of saw in that early AL wildcard round with the Orioles and the Royals. This looked like it may be another one of those games. But into the top of the fourth, like I said, a 1-2-3 inning, Stanton struck out, Chisholm grounded out, and then Rizzo another flyout. So they're getting some contact there. It's not like they were all just striking out the side, but it's not what you want, especially in the postseason. You want some of those fly balls landing into the gaps. Just not a great start at all for the Yankees here, and it wasn't looking great early on. In the bottom of the fourth, Carlos Rodon was still going for the Yanks. He would work another 1-2-3 inning. Lane Thomas would line out to third. Josh Naylor would fly out to left, and then John Kenzie Noel would pop out to second. So it seems like every time Noel would come up to the plate and hit the ball, I thought it was leaving the yard. Even if it was a sky-high pop-up to second base, I mean, I still thought the way this guy looks, the way he comes up to the plate, that every ball he hits is just going to go over the fence. But top of the fifth, Tanner Bibee still in there for the Guardians as he worked another 1-2-3 inning. After Volpe would single, Wells would ground into a double play, and then Verdugo would line out to center. So what looked like finally wouldn't be a 1-2-3 inning for the Yankees ultimately ended up them going down in order. So unfortunately, a Volpe leadoff single did not lead to anything very nice for the Yankees. But in the bottom of the fifth, Guardians would get on the board again. Carlos Rodon, his outing would see an end in this inning, but he would start off decently. He'd get Bo Naylor to pop out to second base, and while Andres Gimenez would double, he would end his outing on a Brian Rocchio strikeout he wouldn't end it on the Brian Rocchio strikeout, but that was pretty much the last really solid benefit of Carlos Rodon's start. Kwan would then single to score Gimenez, and then David Fry would reach on an infield single to shortstop. So Fry was not going to strike out the third time around, especially the season he's having. He's been too good at the plate. You definitely think against a left-handed pitcher, he's not going to really see the ball that poorly. So that was a big surprise to me to see David Fry start off that game so poorly. He ended up reaching and making up for those 2 strikeouts there in the fifth to move Stephen Kwan to third. But Mark Leiter Jr. would come in for Carlos Rodon at this point. He would intentionally walk Jose Ramirez. Lane Thomas would then ground out to second, and the inning would end 2-0. In the top of the sixth, the Yankees would get on the board, and they would get on the board in a big way and in a big help to their future ALCS MVP, Giancarlo Stanton, who would hit a 2-run homer, 446 feet to left center field, scoring Gleyber Torres after he singled to lead off the inning again. Soto, he singled to center as well. Judge would then ground in a double play, so that took another run away. So if Judge didn't ground in that double play, the Yankees have a lead at this point in the game, and they probably don't even have to go into extra innings. Bottom of the sixth, Josh Naylor would walk. John Kenzie Noel would pop up to the shortstop, and then that would be the end of Mark Leiter Jr.'s day. So not an amazing outing for Leiter Jr., but he really came in when Rodon needed him to come in and get him out of a jam. It ultimately proved to be probably one of the more overlooked outings by a Yankee reliever this entire series, and he was really, really solid there in the middle of this Game 5. Despite the box score not really saying the best things about it. But Tim Hill would come in, and he's been incredibly solid all postseason. He would get Bo Naylor to ultimately single to right. Josh Naylor would then move to second, and then he would work a Andres Gimenez double play, and Bo Naylor would be out. They'd get the second out as well, and that would be the inning there. So obviously Bo Naylor having a great game, a pair of hits for him, but Tim Hill ultimately able to work out of that jam and keep the score knotted at 2-2 there. In the top of the seventh, Cade Smith would come in and pitch for Cleveland, and Anthony Rizzo would lead it off with a single to left. Volpe would fly out to center field, and then Herron would come in to pitch for Cleveland, and Wells would ground into a double play, and that would end the inning. every time they tried to get something going, it seemed like Yankees had a double play coming. So this really seemed like an early season Yankee game, or not really early season Yankee game. This seemed like a mid-season, like June Yankees game where this team was like losing. It seemed like every single game. Obviously now a distant memory, but in the bottom of the seventh, Tim Hill would still pitch. Cabrera would move to first base for Anthony Rizzo after pinch running in the previous inning. Brian Rocchio would walk. Stephen Kwan would then ground into a double play, which I feel like is a pretty rare occurrence for Kwan. And I actually want to look that up to see how many times Kwan's grounded into a double play this season, because especially when we moved Jazz Chisholm over from the Marlins to the Yankees, we knew that there were not a lot of times that he grounded into double plays there. Kwan actually only grounded into 5 double plays in this 2024 regular season. So interesting note there that the Yankees really got a pretty rare occurrence out of Stephen Kwan in the seventh inning. Kyle Manzardo would then come in to hit for David Fry, and Jake Cousins would come in and just shut down this Cleveland lineup. He would get Manzardo to strike out swinging, and that would end the inning there, which was huge considering how good Manzardo has started to look, especially towards the end of that ALCS. In the top of the eighth, Heron would still be pitching for Cleveland. Manzardo would be moved to the DH spot, and there would be a quick 1-2-3 inning for the Guardians. Verdugo would ground out to first. Torres would line out to right, and Juan Soto would ground out to second base. In the bottom of the eighth, Jake Cousins was still pitching for the New York Yankees, where he'd get Jose Ramirez to strike out. He'd get Lane Thomas to strike out looking. He'd walk Josh Naylor, and then he'd strike out Jackenzie Noel. So 4 strikeouts for Jake Cousins. When we needed it the most, Jake Cousins came in, and he really just performed so well. This was just not something I expected from him, to go up and shut down a lineup like this in the ALCS. So that's a great thing to see, especially heading into the World Series and moving into the top of the ninth with this game still tied at 2-2. Aaron just flied out to right field. Stanton would then strike out swinging. Jazz Chisholm would get on base with a single to right field, and then Cabrera would ground into a fielder's choice. Jazz Chisholm would be out at second, and that would end the inning there, or end the top half of the inning. To the bottom of the ninth, quick 1-2-3 inning there for Luke Weaver as Bo Naylor struck out swinging. Andres Jimenez grounded out to second base, and Brian Rocchio grounded out to first base. So a quick inning, couple of groundouts for Luke Weaver after his last outing against the Guardians. He really needed that one, and I'm sure was hoping that the Yankees would come in there in the top of the 10th and put up runs, and that's exactly what they did. As after Volpe lined to shortstop, Austin Wells would walk. Verdugo would ground into fielder's choice, so he would be safe, or Wells would be safe at second on an error from Brian Rocchio, and he would be safe as well. Dominguez would come running for Austin Wells. Torres would then strike out swinging, and then Juan Soto came up and delivered one of the greatest at-bats that you will ever see in the game of baseball. A 7-pitch at-bat that resulted in a 3-run homer to take the lead and to ultimately send the Yankees to the World Series. The first pitch was a ball that was a slider. The second was a strike that he took looking for another slider, both 89 miles an hour there. Another one, or the next pitch was a foul ball, also a slider. The next 2 pitches were 2 82-mile-an-hour changeups. The next pitch was an 80 or a 90-mile-an-hour slider. And then the next pitch, the 7th of the at-bat, he finally got the fastball. He made him throw it, and he hit a long 3-run home run. And this wasn't an easy pitch to hit either. This was 95 on the outside corner of the plate. I mean, I'll share the screen so you guys can at least see where this pitch was, because this was seriously not an easy pitch to hit out. And I feel like a lot of people aren't really talking about how difficult this was to really hit out of the park there. You could see right on over that, like number 5 there, just that blue dot on the outside corner there for that 4-seam fastball. Just unbelievable. He was able to take that dead center field. Really not a surprise for, I think, a lot of Yankee fans, but Juan Soto there having his Yankee moment, doing his part as he's done pretty much all in. And if Yankee fans didn't want to pay him before, I think it's pretty clear that they want to pay him now. He gave him a 3-run lead in the top of the 10th inning on a 95-mile-an-hour fastball in the outside upper corner of the strike zone. Took it to right center field, not even dead center field. He took it to right center field and hit a 402-foot massive 3-run home run that won them the American League pennant. It doesn't get much bigger than that. And when it's big like that, I mean, when it's a moment like that, it's hard to recover. It really is just hard to recover. Luke Weaver stayed in for that 10th inning, and Trevino would come in to catch. But Kwan would ground out to second, Manzardo would single, and Ramirez would line out to center field. Then Lane Thomas would fly out to Juan Soto, because who else would catch the last fly ball that ended after hitting that home run? And the Yankees would ultimately take an extra innings thriller to win the American League pennant and to advance to their first World Series since 2009. So, uh, not much else to be said about that game other than instant classic. I mean, it wasn't like that other game in the Yankees Guardian series where it was just sloppy play, the entire time with errors, drop fly balls. This was, in my opinion, a very good showing of baseball from the pitching side of things to just the hitting. uh, Juan Soto's at bat alone, to take that many pitches or to just foul off that many pitches and get that pitch that you really want. And when you get it, regardless of where it is in that zone, being able to deliver in the biggest way possible, that's just as clutch as it gets. Really, there's nothing better than that. That's why people love postseason baseball, regardless of the team. You had to love watching that if you were not a Yankees or a Guardians fan. And to the Guardians, it was an amazing season to their own respects. I mean, I didn't expect them to be this good this season. I didn't expect them to be the 2 seed in this American League playoff bracket, and they really gave the Yankees a bit more of a struggle than I would have hoped for. And guys like Jackenzie Noel, uh, guys like Jose Ramirez. I mean, we talk about Jose all the time, so I feel like there's really no reason to praise him anymore. But Noel and other players on this team, Lane Thomas, David Fry, all had such incredible seasons. And really just helped propel this Guardians team to a new level, and seeing what they have in the farm as well. I'm very excited to at least go into what this Guardians team is going to look like next season, because I think they'll be really exciting, and I think it'd be stupid to say they won't be right back where they were this season next year. But we got to talk about the Dodgers here before we get into our mid-show break. The Dodgers put up another 10 spot in this NLCS Game 6. They won this series 4-2. Sean Manaea would get the loss in this game, unfortunately, making his postseason record this season 2-1. Ben Casparrias would end up getting the win, and he would record his first win of the postseason, now having a 1-0 record. Blake Trinan would come in and get 2 innings pitched for a third save of this postseason for him. So moving down to the play-by-play of this NLCS Game 6. Michael Kopech started off the game in a pretty uncharacteristic way to me. A 4-pitch walk on 4 straight fastballs to Francisco Lindor, and this kind of worried me to start it off right away, because Lindor is very good at setting the tone of these games early. We saw it with that one win that they took earlier in the series, that first win in LA, where he hit that leadoff home run. You kind of knew from there the Mets were ready to come out and start swinging the bat. That, unfortunately, wouldn't be the case as much in this first inning compared to the last time that the Mets won in LA, but they still would get out to an early lead in this first inning after Brandon Nimmo grounded out to second. Mark Vientos would strike out swinging. Pete Alonso would then reach on an infield single, and Lindor would score on an error. So Winker would walk, and Marte would fly out to right as well, but that would come of the top of the first. In the bottom of the first, the Dodgers would get right back on the board here with their NLCS MVP coming through for him, as Ohtani would lead off with a single to center. Betts would strike out swinging. Teoscar would single as well, and Tommy Edman would double to left to score both Ohtani and Teoscar Hernandez. Max Muncy would fly out to center field. Enrique Hernandez would walk, and then Andy Pages would foul out into foul ground towards first base to end the inning. So 2-1 Dodger lead heading into the top of the second, as Ben Casparrias would come in to relieve Michael Kopech. Tyrone Taylor would lead off with a fly out to left. Jeff McNeil grounding out to second base. Francisco Alvarez would then walk. Francisco Lindor would then single to right field, and then Brandon Nimmo would end the inning on a pop-up to shortstop. Moving to the bottom of the second, Sean Manaea would come back out and get Will Smith to lead off with a ground out to third. Chris Taylor would single to left field, and then Shohei Ohtani would strike out swinging. Not Tyrone Taylor. I keep mixing up the two. I feel like I didn't see Chris Taylor much in this series at all, and I just see a Taylor, and I feel like that was just Tyrone Taylor. He's also haunted a lot of Yankee fans this season as well. But not the Taylor we're talking about here. We're talking about Chris Taylor. He stole second base. So a little fun fact for you, Chris Taylor has more stolen bases this postseason than Shohei Ohtani does. But Mookie Betts would end the inning there with a ground out to second base. In the top of the third, the Mets would still have to go up against Ben Casparrias for another couple of hitters. Vientos would ground out to shortstop. Pete Alonso would reach on an infield single to shortstop. So when it's Pete Alonso's possible last game as a Met, you can pretty much guarantee that he's going to do something productive at the plate. And that is exactly what happened in this one. Bondo would come in and pitch for the Dodgers, and he would walk Winker. Marte would then pop out to second base. Tyrone Taylor would get hit by pitch, and Winker would advance to second, which moved Alonso to third. And then McNeil would strike out swinging and end the inning. So nothing to come from the Mets in that top half of the third. Bottom third, Teoscar Hernandez would single to right field. And then Tommy Edman would come up and just continue to produce, continue his success at the plate with a 406-foot bomb to left center field. Max Muncy would then walk to follow that, and then Phil Maton would come into pitch for the Mets, and then Max Muncy would steal second base. Enrique Hernandez would fly out to left. Andy Pages would fly out to right, and then Will Smith would homer to center field 416 feet to score Max Muncy to make it a 6-1 game. The Mets put it out of reach pretty much right here. Chris Taylor would fly out to right field to end the bottom of the third. 4 hits, 3 runs, 0 errors, or 4 runs, 3 hits, 0 errors there for the Dodgers in that inning, and they would take a 6-1 lead. Top of the fourth, Bondo would still be pitching for the Dodgers as Alvarez would single to center field. He actually had a pretty decent day at the plate. And then Francisco Lindor would come up and line out to left field. Brendan Nimmo would strike out swinging, and that would bring in Ryan Brazier for LA, who in his first batter would face a very, very hot Mark Vientos, who has been very good at the plate all postseason. He homered again 401 feet to center field to score him and Francisco Alvarez, which made it a 6-3 game, sparking the Mets, giving them a little bit of life here in the early half of the game. Ultimately, they would only be able to plate 2 more runs, but that was huge to at least get them back into the game. Alonso would ground out to end that inning, or to end that top half of the fourth, and in the bottom half of that inning, Edwin Diaz would come in to pitch for the Mets as Carlos Mendoza looked to just stop all or any kind of run support that the Dodgers could have given their bullpen. He knew he had to put all of his cards on the table. He knew he had to put his chips in the middle, and that's what he did, putting Diaz in there in the fourth. And Ohtani, he fouled out to the catcher to lead off. Betts would walk and then steal second. Teoscar would foul out to first base, and Edman would fly out to center. So a little bit of a scare there for Edwin Diaz, but I feel like that's pretty common. He was still managing just fine and got out of that inning. Top half of the fifth, Ryan Brazier still pitching for LA as Jesse Winker singled to right. Starling Marte struck out swinging to follow it up. Tyrone Taylor flied out to center field, and Jeff McNeil lined out to right field. Quick inning, 0 runs on 1 hit for the Mets there. Bottom half of the fifth, 1-2-3 inning for the Mets as Edwin Diaz came in and really just did his job there. Got Max Muncy to ground out to first. Enrique Hernandez would then strike out swinging, and Andy Pages would then line out to shortstop. So Andy Pages, he almost got one. He just didn't hit it high enough over Francisco Lindor's head, but he almost laced one into the gap and kept what I thought was going to be a productive day at the plate going. And unfortunately just had a pretty lackluster day to follow up his huge final game at Citi Field there where he hit a couple home runs. Top half of the sixth, Evan Phillips would come in for the Dodgers, and the Mets would get something going here. They would get a hit in this inning, and they would get a couple of walks as well, but that's about it. Francisco Alvarez would lead the inning off with a single. Lindor would then follow it up with a fly out. Nimmo would then fly out again to center, and then Vientos would walk. Alonso would walk, and Winker would then fly out, and that would ultimately end the inning. So a little bit of a scare there for Evan Phillips. I believe that was a bases-loaded jam, and that was the last time, at least me watching that game, I really thought there was any chance of runs being scored, at least for the Mets side of things. It was hard for them to really get anything going after that. I think that was a very big momentum swing towards the Dodgers to get out of that big jam. Stanek would come in for the Mets. He'd walk Will Smith. Chris Taylor would sacrifice Smith over to second. Ohtani would then single to center field, which scored Will Smith and moved Chris Taylor to second base. Reed Garrett would then come in to pitch for the Mets as Betts grounded into a fielder's choice. Teoscar Hernandez would line out to shortstop. And while Betts was able to steal second again, they didn't get a run out of it as Edman would ground out to second base. So moving on to the top half of the seventh, Hudson would be in to pitch for the Dodgers as Starling Marte grounded out to third. Tyrone Taylor singled to left field. Jeff McNeil would actually get a hit as well, singling to center field. And then this is where my kind of thought process was wrong in this game, because after that bases loaded jam, I really didn't feel like there was any possibility the Mets were going to put up more runs, and they managed to still make this game kind of close at times. Francisco Alvarez, he had a sacrifice fly to right field, and that made the game a three score game again at 7-4. And Kodai Senga would then come in the seventh for the Mets to try and limit any other damage, but ultimately we all know that that wouldn't be the case. Kodai Senga in the seventh, however, would not allow any runs or any hits. He got Max Muncy to actually get hit by a pitch to lead off that inning, and then Enrique Hernandez would ground into a fielder's choice, where Muncy was out at second, but he wasn't out at first. Pages would strike out swinging. Smith would line out to left, and that would ultimately be it of the bottom of the seventh. Moving to the eighth, Blake Trinan would come in to try and get a 2-inning save, which, I mean, if you were somebody watching that game, I mean, you had to have felt pretty confident in Trinan's ability. He's looked phenomenal all series. He hadn't been seen many times really by that Mets offense at all. And I kind of just knew that wasn't a very good recipe for success for this Mets offense going up against one of the better relievers in this game. Quick 1-2-3 inning for Trinan in the eighth as he got Nimmo to strike out, Vientos to strike out, and then Alonso to strike out as well. So he struck out the side there in what was one of the most dominant innings of pitching that we saw in this entire NLCS. He threw only 12 pitches in that inning, and 3 of them in each at bat were strikes. He only threw 3 balls in that inning, which pretty unreal. Great outing for Blake Trinan in all seriousness. Just a great outing from Blake Trinan. Kodai Senga would still be in the eighth, and the Dodgers would get a bunch of runs here. They would plate 3 to get their final total up to 10. Chris Taylor would single to center. Ohtani would then walk. Betts would then double to score them 2. And then Teoscar Hernandez would sac fly to right field to score Ohtani and Betts. So actually, the Betts double would only score Chris Taylor. The Teoscar sacrifice fly to right would score Ohtani. And then later in that inning, Enrique Hernandez would single to right field to score Tommy Edman and move Max Muncy to third as well after he walked previously to Enrique Hernandez's at bat there, where he singled and scored Tommy Edman. So a 10-4 game when Jose Butto would come in for the Mets, and he would get Andy Pages to fly out to center. McNeil would single and score Tyrone Taylor late in the game for the Mets, but in the top of the ninth, Trinan shut down. He got Winker to strike out swinging. He got Marte to ground out to him, and then he got Alvarez to ground out to second base. So a pretty easy win for the Dodgers in all seriousness. They had the lead for a majority of this game, and after going down early, I think they realized, we're really not making this a series anymore. This can't go to 7. We need to end it there. That's what I'm sure was the main thought process, and the better team came out on top here. The Dodgers will be advancing to their first World Series. Obviously not their first World Series, but their first World Series since I believe that 2020 COVID year World Series, where they obviously are. People will say what they want about it. The Mickey Mouse World Series or the 60-game season, it wasn't a real championship, but now the Dodgers have their own opportunity to go out and just prove everybody wrong there, and just kind of just shut everybody up that's been saying that 2020 World Series wasn't a real one. They have to go out and do it in a full season, which is a fair point, but I feel like the Dodgers are just a force right now that are going to be very hard to beat. And this World Series is just going to be an all-time classic, if not one of the best World Series that we have ever seen in the history of baseball. And that's not just me trying to say that to get, any sort of like clicks or clickbaity type titles or anything. I genuinely feel like this matchup is shaping up to be the best one that we have had in a while, especially after we had a very weird one in the Rangers and the Diamondbacks the last year. I feel like it's only right we get an all-time classic World Series this year to really just bring baseball back and to make everybody love baseball again. I know a lot of people, like I said, will probably be turned off by this matchup, but if you are, I would really just highly tell you to reconsider. This is going to be a great World Series, and the Mets, I'm sure they'll be back in this spot as well. They now know that this is the only team they really have to beat. They can beat everybody else. They just have too much star power, and the Mets, they can go out there and get all the star power they want. So I think this will be a very, very heated NL rivalry for years to come. We'll see if the Mets are all in on Soto next in this offseason for next year, or if they'll retool with a bunch of other free agents. So we'll get into talking about that probably within the next couple of episodes here on Back to the Dugout. But before we get into the World Series preview, I want to just take a quick break here. So I'll be back in 2 minutes to talk about a little bit with this Yankees and this Dodgers matchup for the 2024 World Series. But you're watching Back to the Dugout on the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network here on this Monday afternoon. I'm Toby Schulman, and I will see you guys in a few minutes. We're back in the bottom half of the hour of Back to the Dugout here on the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network. As always, I'm Toby Schulman here on this Monday afternoon, previewing the World Series for you guys. Finally, we got all the way here. I feel like, I mean, it's been a long season, obviously, but I feel like we just started this whole show not too long ago, and it's already to the World Series. So, very very fast how this all plays out, and just crazy to me. But uh, very excited to obviously talk about the rest of this season and the rest of this World Series because, like I said before the break, I think this is going to be an all-time matchup. And that's really why I want to just start the preview in this episode, because while this World Series does start on Friday, and we can necessarily preview this the day before, I felt like it was a good idea to just kind of go over a little bit of this stuff, and if there's anything left over, I mean, we could just uh, finish up the preview and predictions on Thursday, which I'm sure will definitely be a topic of discussion. But I thought it was just necessary to at least go over some storylines, some narratives that are going to be in play in this World Series, and to just kind of build up some excitement for this thing as a whole. But like I said earlier in the show, in the introduction, the first meeting of these two absolute giants since 1981. The Dodgers won this time, or they won the last time these two faced in that 1981 World Series. However, the Yankees are 8-3 all time against the Dodgers in the Fall Classic. So this will be the 12th time that these two are meeting in the World Series, but the first time in a very, very long time. So, I mean, at least for a lot of older baseball fans, I'm sure this is a rivalry that they are very, very used to. If there's anyone in the chat that can remember that old, Yankees uh, Dodgers rivalry, I mean, that must have been like the Kirk Gibson era, and coming out of Koufax dominance of what was at the 60s, and way before obviously any time that I was watching baseball. So it's really cool to see this rivalry come back in full swing, and I'm just hoping that it's not the only time that these two will face in off in the fall classic. So 1978. All right. I wasn't too far off then. So about 3 years off. But yeah, I had a feeling that was about the Kirk Gibson era time. But moving into the biggest storylines for this World Series, I feel like the biggest one is very, very obvious there. Shohei Otani versus Aaron Judge has to be just the two biggest products in baseball out on the field together, clashing for the ultimate prize head to head. I mean, is that just not the coolest narrative in maybe sports of all time? I mean, when again, maybe people in the chat can let me know when the last time was that we had two of just the best people in their respected sport going up against each other to win a championship. I mean, at least in baseball, I can't remember when that was. And then I mean, for other sports like football, I mean, maybe when it was the Bucks Chiefs Super Bowl, what was that like a few years ago or whatever? I mean, I don't know. But that's at least the only thing I could think of off the top of my head. But this is just the most obvious narrative here that's going to be playing out pretty much the entire series. You've seen it all postseason. The Shohei Otani, he's batting in up next in three batters, or all these random graphics for Otani, and then with Judge slumping this postseason and starting to pick it back up, this matchup for these two is probably the most anticipated thing that we've seen in baseball history. The two biggest products in the world, biggest product on the U.S. side, and then the biggest product on the foreign side of things. It's going to generate a lot of viewers, and this is going to generate a lot of clicks and a lot of views, and it's going to be a very, very fun matchup. Uh, like I kind of alluded to earlier, I mean, arguably the two greatest players of all time in the sport. I feel like it's getting to the point where you can kind of argue that these guys are up there with some of the better players of all time. And then obviously this is not up for debate, but the two just greatest generational talents of the game of baseball, at least in this generation. These two really are just special, and to see them going up for the ultimate prize of a World Series is really fun. But the overall narrative of just two superstar teams is going to be, I feel like, the big overarching one. Obviously, Shohei and Judge is the big, captain versus captain, player versus player clash. But you also have Mookie versus Soto, who are two players who are, without a doubt, top five players in the league, but they often get overlooked because they're on the team with guys like Shohei and Aaron Judge, which, it's not that they're, getting overlooked because they're bad. They're just getting overlooked because they're simply on a team with one of the greatest players of just any generation of baseball. So, I mean, just the star power on both sides is unbelievable, and that's going to be a huge narrative in this series. Because not only do you have Shohei and Judge and Mookie and Soto, you also have the additional stars like Giancarlo Stanton, Gleyber Torres, Freddie Freeman, Max Muncy, Teo Hernandez, Will Smith, and then you've got Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon, you've got Jack Flaherty, and you've got Walker Buehler. You've got these big names, and you've got some very, very big time players in every realm of both of these teams' franchises. The pitching's great, the bench is great, the offense is great. I mean, everything about both of these teams right now, it just seems like they're peaking, and that's really the other narrative, and that's the final narrative that I feel like I came up with that not a lot of people are really talking about too much. Is that both of these powerhouses are not only are they matching up in the World Series, but they seem to be peaking at the right time. And I say that because I don't feel like I've seen both of these teams play better baseball than they played, in their last, couple of games. Say what you want about the Yankees and the Dodgers dropping, a game a couple of games ago, but I still feel like overall they are definitely peaking. And it made me kind of think about how we could look at these two teams, head to head to see who really has the edge in this series. But I was really looking at it, and it's hard to tell. Each of these lineups are stacked. Like I said, it's like two of the three highest payrolls in baseball, just peaking at the right time to compete for a World Series, which is, again, such a cool narrative. And I feel like last year there weren't a lot of narratives to work around, and this year you could kind of pick and choose which one you want to follow. This is going to be a very fun series, and I would be very surprised to see this series end before, or what was it? What would it be? Before 6 games? I would be very surprised to see this series not go to 6 or 7 games, as I feel like what would be the easiest thing to say about that. But I wanted to kind of preview both of these lineups. I know obviously the Yankees and the Dodgers are very well-known lineups, especially if you've been watching this show for a while. You know we talk about the Yankees and the Dodgers quite a bit. So I wanted to look at how these lineups have been performing in the postseason, just compare position by position, and just see who's kind of got their position players or certain guys at certain spots hitting better. Maybe that could be something a little bit telling about how these guys are going to perform in the World Series. And then we're going to look at how they played against each other in the regular season to kind of look at some players to definitely look at in this World Series. But I started off with the designated hitter because obviously we're going to start off by looking at Shohei Ohtani. He's just been a force with runners in scoring position. Not as much when he comes up to the plate by himself, but when there's runners in scoring position, a switch just seems to flip off in Shohei Ohtani's head as he is hitting 818 in his last 22 at bats with runners in scoring position. And I saw Jeff Passan tweet that, so shout out to Jeff Passan for that. But that's not an 818 OPS or an 818 slug. That's an 818 batting average. That's 22 at bats. He has had 18 hits in those last 22 at bats with runners in scoring position. That's one of the best stats you could see as just a manager, as somebody who is a Dodger fan. If you have a hitter that is hitting 818 with a runner in scoring position, that's all you really need to win a World Series. You need a guy who could just plate runs, and that's what Shohei does when the guys are on base. I don't know if he'll be the leadoff guy going into this World Series. I don't really know if Dave Roberts would really want to switch things up. It seems like he's actually been doing a very, very good job managing this postseason, knowing that he'd be in the hot seat if he really just didn't do a good job with it. But we'll see what happens with Shohei. I mean, I feel like having him at leadoff to get the most at bats is regardless a smart thing to do. And even though he hits 818 with guys in scoring position, having Ohtani getting more at bats and having Shohei Ohtani just get up more is more beneficial than I think moving him out of the leadoff role. But in the postseason, he's been doing fairly, very solid. 286 batting average, 434 on base, a 500 slug, and a 934 OPS. He's got 12 runs and 12 hits on 3 home runs, 10 RBIs, and 21 total bases, 11 walks, and a very interesting stat with no stolen bases in 11 postseason games. But 12 runs in 11 postseason games is very, very good there. So Ohtani has been very, very productive as always. He has the edge, obviously, to Giancarlo Stanton in pretty much every single factor here. You can't even really argue that Stanton hits the ball a lot harder than Shohei does because we all know Shohei could very well do that. But Stanton, he's coming off of his ALCS MVP winning series. 294 batting average this postseason for him with a 385 on base, a 794 slug, and an 1179 OPS. 27 total bases, 5 home runs, 2 doubles, 10 hits. Stanton has been everything Yankee fans could want and more from him in the World Series, or not in the World Series, in the postseason. And we'll just see if they can get that out of him in the World Series. But moving on to the catching spot, I thought this was actually a very interesting one to look at. We obviously have Will Smith, 29-year-old Will Smith, and then we have on the Yankees side of things, we have a 26-year-old in Austin Wells. So very young catcher in Austin Wells who had a very good rookie campaign. But since moving into this postseason in 9 games, just has been very unproductive to say the least. An 091 batting average, a 167 on base, and a 182 slug. The bat has not been too kind for him this postseason. The OPS is brutally bad at 348. He does have 3 RBIs. He hit a home run with a pair of singles, but he's got 7 strikeouts to 5 walks. So even when he's not hitting, he's not seeing the ball very well either. Hopefully that's subject to change against the Dodgers. But if anything, just need Wells to show up with some good defense and at least a semi-productive bat there for a little bit. Will Smith, everybody knows Will Smith, just a very solid catcher, the Dodgers franchise catcher right now. Also has not been very productive this postseason, to be honest. In 11 games played, 158 batting average, a 289 on base, and a 316 slug. A 605 OPS for him, 6 hits, 7 runs, 2 home runs, and 6 RBIs. So Smith has been a little more productive than Wells, obviously, with those 2 home runs to his 1. When Smith did hit those home runs, they were in very, very big times. And 6 RBIs is very, very big for your team, obviously, in the postseason there. So while the OPS is obviously bad, the average is not good, just the stats in general aren't great. He has come up pretty big a couple times for him. So I would expect that to happen at one point or another in this series against the Yankees, especially against their left-handed pitching. But moving on to the first base spot, who we'll see if it's going to be 35-year-old Freddie Freeman. I mean, I imagine it's going to be. He has a week to nurse that ankle discomfort that he's been feeling for quite some time, and we'll see if that's going to be something that's still bothering him moving into the World Series. But similar to the Dodgers, the Yankees have had their fair share of injury struggles with their first baseman Anthony Rizzo this season. The 35-year-old left-handed hitter has battled injury. He came back and has been better, but it's not necessarily been the greatest. The greatest production all the time, but just having Anthony Rizzo back in the postseason is obviously incredibly valuable for the Yankees. This postseason, Anthony Rizzo in 5 games played has hit 429, 500, 500 for an 1,000 OPS. He's been great. It's just it hasn't been the most amount of games played. Huge in that ALCS, obviously, but we would have loved to have had Rizzo back for that ALDS, and having him back for this World Series is obviously going to be a huge, huge, huge boost for this Yankees offense. But moving to the second base spot, Gleyber Torres is the Yankees' second baseman and leadoff guy versus Gavin Lux, who is honestly not looking terrible. It's just Gavin Lux has never been breaking out for like a great postseason or a great season, and his postseason stats have not been very good this season. 8 games played, 24 at bats. He's recorded 4 runs scored on 5 hits, 1 home run, 3 RBIs, 8 total bases. That's just not really going to cut it, honestly. He's slashing for a 208 average, 259 on base, and a 333 slug for a 593 OPS. So not great offensive production from Gavin Lux, but he does have it in him to kind of just maybe turn it on at some point. So while Gavin Lux is not the most premier bat in this lineup right now, he is a bat that can certainly get it going. And with the short porch there, a left-handed batter that I would not want to leave a ball down the plate to for sure. But Gleyber Torres in this postseason has been honestly just everything Yankees fans could have wanted for him. He's hitting 297 with an 832 OPS, 11 hits in 37 at bats in 9 games played. Couple of doubles, a home run, 5 RBIs, 16 total bases, and he's walking more than he's striking out right now. This is everything you could want in a leadoff guy if you are the New York Yankees. This is just everything they wish they could have wanted to see out of Gleyber Torres. And with his contract looming over his head, I mean, this is awesome to see because I would think the Yankees want to bring him back after the season that he's having, and this could be big for the future. So I think the Yankees definitely have the edge there with Gleyber Torres at the second base spot. Moving to shortstop, where Tommy Edman really just came in and just has filled in such a good role, and not only just the shortstop role, but everywhere. In the NLCS, he really did a good job at shortstop. And in the ALCS, Anthony Volpe looked really solid as well. And just in this postseason in general, Volpe has been incredibly solid here. And Tommy Edman, in his own respects as well, has been really, really good. And both of these guys have been incredible. But I want to just really, really shout out Tommy Edman, the NLCS MVP, hitting 341 in 11 games played in this postseason so far with an 811 OPS, 1 home run, 12 RBIs, 21 total bases, 3 doubles, 15 hits, and 6 runs scored. He has been arguably the most productive bat for this entire Dodgers lineup. And really, I mean, when you look at how this deadline went for the Dodgers, they crushed it. I mean, this could not have gone better for them having Tommy Edman now. And it's really cool seeing a guy like Tommy Edman produce for a team like this in the postseason. These are the type of guys that come over and really just shine in the postseason. The utility guys who can hit, who can play. They don't get enough love when they're on the teams that don't succeed very, very well. And Tommy Edman has been doing incredible. But moving to the third base spot, or we got to go over Volpe's postseason first, because while Edman's been honestly really solid to the point where obviously he's got the edge over Volpe in this sense, Volpe's been really good. And after, kind of struggling there in the season a little bit after starting out well, Volpe hit for a 310 average right now in a 9-game played postseason, 459 on base percentage, 345 slugging percentage, and an 804 OPS. He's been incredible. In 29 at bats, 6 runs scored, 9 hits, 1 double, an RBI, and 10 total bases. So not hitting for much power, but that's not really something you really expect out of Anthony Volpe at all. We need Anthony Volpe to hit for average, and that's exactly what he's doing. Maybe this is a little bit of something where he gets more postseason experience under his belt and he starts to look like Tommy Edman. Maybe that's the case, but Volpe has been great. He's really been a great spark of this middle of the lineup, and hopefully he can continue to be like that through this World Series. If anybody saw, I kind of wish I pulled this up for the show, but if anybody saw the picture of Anthony Volpe at the 2009 World Series parade, to see him now playing shortstop for the Yankees in the World Series for the first World Series that they've been to since that World Series, that's just a pretty cool moment there. But moving to the third base spot, we've got Jazz Chisholm, who will most likely be holding down this spot still for this World Series. I'd be very surprised if that wasn't the case. And then Max Muncy at third base for the LA Dodgers, obviously, if Freddie Freeman is playing at that first base spot. Max Muncy, he's been honestly very good this postseason at times. His numbers on paper don't look the greatest as far as average goes, but everything else is incredibly good. A 468 on base percentage for him, a 545 slug, a 1014 OPS. While he's been hitting 242, he's been hitting for some power with 3 home runs, 5 RBIs, 18 total bases. He's also walking more than he's striking out as well. So this is about as good as it gets for Max Muncy. And I mean, this is a great bat to have being this productive in the middle of your order. This could spark a lot of problems for the Yankees, especially if they can't get that top of the order out like at all. This is going to be very, very difficult for the Yankee pitchers to navigate this Dodgers lineup if guys like Max Muncy and Enrique Hernandez are hitting that well and they can't get the top of the order out. But moving to the Yankees, Jazz has just not been good in this postseason. Just straight up has not been good. Don't get me wrong, it's awesome having Jazz on the squad still, providing that spark, that energy in the field. He's been playing great defense as well. It's just the bat hasn't been there. He's hitting 147, a 216 on base, a 265 slug, a 481 OPS. He hasn't been good. He's been well below league average. He does have that 1 home run against the Royals, but that's pretty much all. He's got 11 strikeouts to 2 walks. Just simply not seeing the ball well. Hopefully this week will help him kind of reset, kind of get out of the public eye a little bit and get out of the media for a little bit and just dial in your bat a little bit more. I would be very surprised if Jazz Chisholm has just as bad of a World Series as he had a previous 2 series, the ALDS and ALCS. I'd be very surprised if those series are better for Jazz than this World Series is. I think he's going to turn it up to another level, especially in a series as important as the Fall Classic is. But moving to the outfield for our last little bit of position player comparison. Sorry, I don't know why it took so long to get that phrasing out. But moving to the center field spot, Aaron Judge, and it's obviously Aaron Judge going to have the edge on whatever center fielder the Dodgers choose to roll out, whether that's Andy Pages, Enrique Hernandez, Tommy Edman. But Enrique Hernandez has been holding it down out there for the Dodgers. And while Aaron Judge is Aaron Judge, there are not a lot of hitters that are better than a postseason Enrique Hernandez. Yeah, sorry. I'm used to saying Kike Hernandez, but I guess Enrique Iglesias is playing center field for the Dodgers. Hernandez has been good in this postseason, like very, very good as he's usually been. A 303 average, 378 on base, a 485 slug, and an 863 OPS. He's done his job more than it really was necessary. I mean, he's been incredibly productive. 5 RBIs, 16 total bases, 2 home runs, 10 hits in 9 games. He's been really all the Dodgers have needed him to be and more. This is a guy that they love going back to for very obvious reasons. He loves being a Dodger, and they love watching this guy play in October. So Aaron Judge obviously hasn't been great in this postseason, hitting 161 with a 704 OPS, but he's been a little bit better lately. It seems like he's found his swing a little bit more. He's starting to walk a little bit more. He's starting to just hit for just a little bit more power in general. We saw that in that last loss that they took to the Guardians. But Judge should obviously turn it up a little bit more in this World Series. And if he doesn't, then a lot of Yankee fans are going to be very, very angry about that. But if Judge is not turning it up in center field, someone is going to be doing that for the Yankees in right field, and that is 26-year-old Juan Soto. And on the right field side of things for the Dodgers, it looks like it is going to be Mookie Betts, obviously sitting out there. Mookie Betts has been very, very good in this postseason. He's been a guy that we've gone to a lot to give us some hit props. And he's hit 295, 404 on base, a 659 slug, and an OPS over 1,000. Hit 4 home runs this postseason. He's big in that Padres series. He was, big at times in this series against the Mets. And against the Yankees left-handed pitching, he's going to be very, very good, I feel like. And that's something that makes me personally a little bit nervous. Moving on to Juan Soto, enough said about Juan Soto. We talked about him already, how just good he's been at the plate, the at-bats he's putting together, a 333 average this postseason with an OPS north of 1,100. He's been incredible. 3 home runs, 8 RBIs, 22 total bases. He's walking the same amount that he's striking out. He has 11 hits and 6 runs scored in 9 games played. He's about as productive as it gets for a superstar. And to round things out in the outfield and to round out our position player comparison and what will probably round out the first half of our World Series preview here on Back to the Dugout, we've got the left field spot, which features Teoscar Hernandez for the Dodgers and Alex Verdugo for the Yankees. And Verdugo's been solid for the Yankees in this postseason, especially early on there. And then, lately he's been kind of taking a little bit of a dip. He's hitting 194 with a 286 on base, a 544 OPS. And the numbers just took a slight dip. He's walking the same amount that he is striking out. He only has 8 total bases, though. And he does have 3 RBIs, so that's good. And a couple of doubles, but still, only 8 total bases, which honestly, you only need a couple of big hits to really, in my eyes, be a productive enough postseason bat, especially if you're, as a team, making it to the World Series. I feel like that's just not, you don't have to be a 300 hitter in the postseason, but you have to be able to get some hits there. And it just seems like lately Verdugo's kind of falling back into a little bit of a slump, maybe. He's also a very energetic, passionate player. I expect him to turn that up very, very nicely in the World Series, as I expect for most of these guys, obviously, who wouldn't try to elevate their game a little bit higher in the World Series. But for Teoscar Hernandez, 11 games played, 40 at-bats, a 200 batting average, a 690 OPS. He hasn't been great, but he has hit 2 home runs, and he does have 14 total bases. This is a very, very, very dangerous hitter. Obviously, the 2024 Home Run Derby champ. So I thought we'd have time to maybe go over the bullpens or the starting rotations, but we'll end up doing that in our second kind of half of this preview on Thursday. Kind of only right that we do at least like a 2-parter for the World Series for the big fall classic at least. But that's all about the time that I have for the show today. If you guys have any questions at all about what I feel like the predictions are going to be, let me know in the comments. Obviously, if you're watching the live, leave them down on the replay, and I'll try to get to them later. But if you are watching live, I really appreciate it. Go check out all of our content here on the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network, whether that's my stuff, Robbie's stuff, Defo stuff, Christian stuff, Drew stuff. Everybody's stuff is great on here, and we're putting out some really good content here, not just with baseball, but everything. And we're trying to really be a well-rounded unit here. So go check out all of their stuff, and they'll have all their programming out this week, and I'll be back to see you guys on Thursday, where we will discuss more of this Yankees-Dodgers World Series, as well as giving our predictions for who will come out on top in this fall classic. So stay tuned for that. And as always, guys, I'm Toby Schulman. For Back to the Dugout, I will see you guys on Thursday.